Good afternoon from the UK. It's about just past 3 o'clock here, and the world has changed on its axis because we're now broadcasting 2 times a week instead of once a week. We've recently received Apple approval, some six-figure investment into the podcast in a kind of weird way, but I'll talk about that another time. So we're expanding and we're growing, and who better to initiate this development and this growth with amazing Brett King, who will tell you all about himself. I have one anecdote about him myself. In Beirut in 2016, I was asked to interview Steve Wozniak in front of 10,000 people in Lebanon, in Beirut. Very nervous, but the guy I had to speak to beforehand was Brett. I had to interview him. It was like going to a Brentford football match, which is basically the height of all sport, maximum of about 12,000 people. And I was very nervous. And Brett was absolutely amazing and putting me at my ease. He was very honest with me after my alleged performance. And since then, we've stayed in touch. He's been in London. We've met at shows. He's a great man. I've got a great deal of respect.
Fast friends. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And I, looked at his book, reviewed his book for my website, and we've stayed in touch. And I'm absolutely delighted he can make time for us. So, Brett King, I think I described you as I got my confidence up in Beirut as Brett King, head of Bang King or something like that.
Yes.
Maybe you could improve on that rubbish that I came out with.
No, I can't remember what you said on the day, but it worked. Whatever it worked, it was. Despite the fact you said I was putting you at your ease, but I've been on the speaking circuit for over a decade now, and I don't generally get nervous when I do speaking gigs. But the really interesting element of the whole Wozniak thing was that I was nervous because I was opening that event.
Absolutely.
Right. I had that keynote, and the real challenge with that, from my perspective, wasn't I knew I could do the keynote, but it was the fact that I knew everyone would be comparing me to Woz.
Well, at least you weren't on after him. Did you? The organisers stitched me up for that, right?
No, I know that they gave you extra time. I remember that.
They
said, you did a good job, man.
I had the ticker in front of me. I didn't want to swear. I got down to about 13 minutes, and they told me I had to finish spot on for CNN.
And then they gave you extra time.
And they gave me an extra 30 minutes. Absolutely very funny for them. But anyway, let's forget about the past. I think we should probably need to talk about the present and the future. You've been holed up in New York, downtown, right? How's that been?
I'm on the Lower East Side. Just give me 1 second. Alexa, stop. My Alexa just went off. I've been holed up on the Lower East Side of New York. Stay at home. This is day 66 of stay-at-home orders in New York.
Jesus.
So it feels like day 66 right now. It's getting a bit stir-crazy. Business overall is like the speaking business obviously is being decimated. 100% revenues disappeared. I'm sure you're in the same situation, Monty.
Absolutely.
The podcast business is doing well. I'm glad to hear you guys have, launched so strongly.
Thank you.
We're running 8 podcasts through Provoke Media now. Obviously we produced Breaking Banks. This year's our 7th anniversary.
Wow.
Our guest to celebrate our 7th anniversary show is John McAfee, so that was fun.
was that last Friday?
Yeah, I recorded it on Friday. It goes to air on Thursday, so that's going to be fun.
I did him on Wednesday. Well, no, I did him on Thursday. It came out on Friday.
So
it's just it was $100 million. He said Bitcoin was going to.
Yeah. Well, he's obviously he's now working on his Ghost protocol and things. But so 7 years in, we have a podcast now that we've developed a nice cadence with. We've had an amazing time, sort of documenting for history the rise of fintech May 2013 is when we started the show, and if you have been following fintech and what's been happening in the space, obviously that was pretty early in the days of fintech.
Yeah.
This predates the likes of Monzo and N26 and many of the sort of household styling and many of the household names in the fintech space today. But it's been a good run for us. Obviously, I've also got Movin, which is my startup based here in New York and with our offices in Philly. We just started probably the biggest project for Movin, particularly on our enterprise side, in our history with Saudi Telecom, launching a challenger bank in 7 countries. Wow. So that's been a huge deal for us. And so, there's, and of course, with the whole coronavirus thing, the push to digital is accelerating. And so Absolutely. This is why things like podcasts and, the digital stuff on the fintech side is getting some increased attention. So, it's not all bad, but it's tough working from home. It's, yeah. I have times when I'm extremely productive at home, but I also have times when I'm not. And one of the biggest challenges I face is writing. I as an author, it might sound unusual, but I can't write from home.
No, it's crazy. No, because listen, I'm a coffee shop writer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
I went around the world in '94 and wrote a book with a Mont Blanc pen. And I remember being in some springs in Manali in India, Vashisht, I think. Yeah, Vashisht. And I was sitting there and I had baked beans for the first time in 6 months, which was good, instead of curry, eggs and toast and all that stuff. And there was a trombone playing in the square. Now, if you can't write with that in the background, you can't do anything. But just to sit, I think Lao Tzu, the philosopher, said, that the further you go, the less you know. I'm not like that. I need action around me. This should be a great time for writers, but as you say, it's not.
No, I write as you do in coffee shops. I find that white noise just helps me get in the zone. And my, if you've ever read any of my books and you look in the acknowledgements, I always put my favorite coffee shops that I have written in. I have some really memorable times, writing in coffee shops in South Africa, in New Zealand, in Auckland, and Wellington, and in China, all around the world, in Oslo. I have these memories coming into my head right now, where I've had times where I've written the Old Town in Stockholm, so. That's for me part of my culture of writing. So that's I'm trying to get a book out right now. It's my 7th book. It's called The Rise of Techno-Socialism. I'm writing this in partnership with an economist out of Hong Kong, a friend of mine called Richard Petty, who is just coming out of coronavirus hell himself. Having been in hospital with the full thing. But it's the world is never quite going to be the same after this, and I don't think people are quite ready for the extent to which this is going to change behaviors. And there are still things that are in the institutional memory of humanity from the Black Plague. You have these children's rhymes. Ring a rosy, a pocketful. This comes from the times of the Black Plague, and so we have these long memories from pandemics in the past, and just sort of thinking that we're going to just laugh this off, and we're going to be able to get out of lockdown and get straight back to the way it was. I think we're just fooling ourselves, honestly.
No, well, I was talking to a friend of mine, I kind of remain nameless. It's probably one of the richest guys I know. It was in Dubai. Huge interests everywhere, pharmacies in Canada, malls, real estate, property in Dubai. And he said he reckons he's had a 3 billion portfolio in Dubai. There's no one in any of those buildings. And he reckons that he's, at the very least, he's taken a $2 billion hit, right?
Yeah.
At the least. I know Dubai is probably slightly clinical in the way that it approaches travel and its society. But I was thinking, does that mean that maybe, using him as an example, that we've lost every day like 60% of the world's wealth? I don't think it's that bad. I mean, that would be catastrophic. But I reckon it feels like we've just lost a chunk. Everything is 25% less. You know what I mean?
Well, I think if you look at global GDP will probably be down, or economic activity rather, will probably be down 25-30% by the end of this year. So I think you're right. And that obviously has a material impact on the globe. But there's subtleties to it as well. Will we still be shaking hands? When we get back together after this, will we be? You and I, we'd probably give each other a bear hug if we saw each other at a conference, right?
Absolutely.
Is that behavior going to change?
Are we going to be? That was one of the greatest feelings of my whole life, was hugging you, Brett. Do you know? No, but I think you've answered your own question. Absolutely, we are not going to be shaking hands, and we are not going to be hugging. And there's going to be this macabre dance every time we come into sight of a human. I've been lucky. I live in the countryside. You know what I mean?
Long and prosper.
Absolutely, thank you. But I mean, I'm still living with a teenager who should be out there with his mates at the age of 17. And love your family as much as you do. I can't wait to get rid of them. You know what I mean? And I'm sure it's mutual. And we're probably in day 43 or 44 or something like that. But the sense of there being, I mean, I'm like you, I've lost all my revenue overnight from conferences. I'm getting hassled non-stop from people who want a favour, who I haven't heard from 10 years, who I didn't fucking like that much anyway, sometimes. You know what I mean? Because they know where I am. I can't, I'm having more calls. I can't go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Oh, well, I've had this idea, Monty. I'm not saying that I'm a hero or anything like that. But I'm just getting pissed off with that side of it, is that my phone has never stopped ringing. There's messages all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand people are trying to be innovative and so forth. I'm getting at least 5 requests a day, probably like you, to do these free webinars, for people who are charging audiences, some aren't, admittedly, and I'm also getting clients who are coming back and saying, we are going to have some events in the future, and can you support us in the meantime? Which I'm generally more amenable to, particularly clients who book me for many gigs over the year. But it does come back to, when you start out in the speaking world, and you don't have a sort of brand in that space, you'll often get approached by people who will say, hey, listen, come and speak at our event, I'll give you some exposure. Right? And we're started to see that again.
I know.
Which is like ridiculous for guys like you and I have been on the circuit for so many years, right? Because it's like, everyone knows us. We don't need exposure. We the business speaks for itself. But look, these are unusual times, and so I'm trying to evaluate what I do when I do it. I do podcasts all the time. I'm doing, apart from my own podcast, I'm doing 3 or 4 podcasts a week right now. McAfee tells me he's doing 5 a day.
I think he's
sounds about right.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but when it comes to, the virtual conference stuff, there's a lot of unknowns right now. There's a lot of, we don't quite know how long this is going to go on for. We don't know what new business models are going to merge out of this. I think, I would love to see, for example, conferences coming in the future where you have a VR option.
Yeah.
And we've been looking at the tech for this, and so you can have tracking software track the speaker on stage, and then you can actually project that speaker into the virtual realm. So people could choose to either come to the physical event or the virtual event. I think there might be some merit in stuff like that, as people are unsure about coming back into, events, live events with other people around.
No, I mean, the idea. I mean, to be fair, I'm not really. I mean, you keep talking about us being the same. I'm not really as experienced as you and as good as you. That's not being humble brag. That's truthful. A lot of the time, I didn't really enjoy it, right? Because I used to get nervous, and then I'd be kind of overhyped afterwards, and then there'd be a networking event, and then physically it wasn't very good for me. And as you know, sometimes you have to kiss a few frogs before you get the princess or whatever. Kim Kardashian was my last gig in Armenia. It's not a bad way to go out, I suppose. And I mean the word out. I can't see anything happening in this space for 2 years. I don't think people will want to go to. I mean, imagine these ridiculous ones like Mobile World Congress or what used to be CeBIT or the one in Vegas in January.
CES, yeah.
CES, sorry, yeah, thanks. Would you really? Okay, I'll give you. If you were offered a decent-sized amount of money, probably the most you've earned before lockdown, to go and speak at CES, it was going to be half full than it was last year, which is still very full. Would you do it?
Probably, because I think I've had coronavirus, but
oh, really? Well, you'll probably be able to prove it by then, right?
Yeah, well, so I'm waiting for antibody tests that are consistent, right? So right now there's a lot of antibody tests in the United States, but if you watch, like last week tonight, John Oliver, more than 50% of them are inaccurate. So
yes, exactly. I'm not going to get a test until I know it's.
Yeah, but
I don't think I deserve a test until other people.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, I suspect I had it back in January, actually, which would be earlier than the first official case in the United States after I traveled to China on January 5th and 6th. But I don't know for sure. I won't know till I get the antibodies test.
Yeah.
But look, I do think, that illustrates we're just one the conference business is one small segment in hundreds of thousands of different domains, and to assume that we're just going to go back to normal is I think problematic. And I think that if we don't learn the lessons from this, then we're bound not only to repeat this disaster over and over again, but the recovery will take much longer. Now, I've been working on this book since this new book I'm writing right now. I've been working on this book for about 18 months. It's called The Rise of Techno-Socialism.
Yeah, go on.
And I was looking at the populist movements around the world and why they were coming up, and all the gross inequality in economies like the US and the UK and Australia, and people not being able to afford even basic housing. If you're on a minimum wage in the United States, you work full time on minimum wage, you can't afford to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in any of the 50 states in America. So that's sort of illustrative of the problem. So you look at those sort of issues in totality, and then you look at, before coronavirus, I was looking at the potential of that issue of inequality, the rise of artificial intelligence displacing people from employment,
Absolutely.
And then the impact of climate change displacing, people with sea rise and other pandemics that were coming out of the glaciers and things like that as well, as being potentially disruptive to our way of life.
Yes.
And that, so if it wasn't coronavirus, it was going to be artificial intelligence and the rise of sort of unemployment based on automation, or it was going to be climate change, or either of those two were going to be dramatically impactful to humanity and have roughly the same economic impact as we've seen with coronavirus. So if we just get back to normal and we don't rethink the way capitalism is designed for the human species, then we're screwed, because we're just going to keep repeating this over and over again, you know?
But I think the pandemic is connected with climate change. If you start melting ice caps, and if you start burning forests, like look at your home country of Australia, you know, if you burn forests in Africa every year, the Amazon, where are those pathogens going to go? They're going to land on a human, right? And they're probably unknown because they've been buried in the ice, or they've been buried in the canopy of a beautiful tree or whatever. My take, for what it's worth, is that we've been use it as a kind of, because we've acted like children. Let's use school analogies, right? We've been put in detention for 3 months. We've been told that we're going to have to stay in detention. And once we get out, if we can change our behavior, we can stay on the planet.
We'll go back in.
Or we'll either go back in, or we'll be fucking expelled for good.
Exactly. And so that's a pretty good analogy, and it's pretty accurate. So, you know, if you look at this is sort of, I'll try and phrase it quickly. But if you look at the key problem humanity has got right now, is that we're very, very short-term focused.
Yeah.
Right. Let's take away the inequality and all of those issues, which, you know, moral questions of the species. But as a species, we've known for 50 years that climate change was coming.
Yep.
And yet we didn't mitigate the risks of climate change. Why? And you'd say, well, we weren't commercially motivated to do that because everyone was making money off fossil fuels or whatever. That's a crazy excuse.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. You're talking about the survival and health and prosperity of the species. Now, so we're trading off these short-term economic gains for long-term unmitigated disaster, you know, and it doesn't make any logical sense. But the markets, the financial markets, are not incentivized to fix social problems like, you know, the potential impact of climate change, or homelessness, or, you know, the health of people, or education. You know, there's no metrics in the markets to address these issues, and so the markets are like, hey, we had another record quarter, profits are up, the market's doing great, and that's the core intent.
They exist for the AI. They exist for the integer. They exist for the algorithm. You know what I mean?
And so, it's a very short-term thinking. So we have to get back to what Aristotle talked about. You know, and I know you're a student of history and philosophy and things like that, but Aristotle was asked, you know, what is the purpose of humanity? And he said, the purpose of humanity is, as a species, to prosper.
Yep.
But that can only work if humanity as a species is united in that common goal of prospering. And we're not united, you know, and that's the biggest issue.
The thing for me is that I've never made any money out of interest, right? It's not because I'm Islamic or anything like that. I declared war on money when I was about 19. And when I lived on a kibbutz in Israel, I was a communist. And then slowly but surely, I realized the hooks of capitalism, you know, it was better to maybe fight from within than from being, you know, knocking on the door outside. And I've played it a little bit over the last 20 years, you know what I mean? I've done quite well, but I've never saved any money. I've never made any money out of money, you know what I mean? Even the cryptocurrency that I did have was stolen. So just call me lucky, do you know what I mean? But there are other forms, right, of prosperity, right? I'll give you a stupid example, right? You know the song Golden Brown by the Stranglers? Never a frown.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
So Dave Greenfield, who wrote the song, was the kind of organist in the Stranglers, right? And I used to collect 7-inch punk records, right? And rip picture sleeves, to the extent that in a framing shop, there's about 150 punk singles ready to be framed, because I used to do that. But I also have the original 7-inch in a cardboard kind of, with the name on it, like
The
underlined.
cardboard sleeve, yep.
The cardboard sleeve, thank you. You know what I mean? And so I was listening to that, and someone said, "Yeah, God, yeah, I saw them in 1981 at the Hammersmith Palais with a barber choir and a stripper and all this stuff." And I put on Peaches and listened to that. And then for some reason, I went into my study, right? And I thought, you know what? The one thing I haven't done this week, or these 6 or 7 weeks, is haven't cleared out my old photographs. So it'd be quite nice to do that. So I opened the cupboard with all the shit that's in there. And guess what lands in my 2 hands, right? 2 cardboard sleeves by the fucking Stranglers, right? Now, to me, right, my mate calls it coincidence, right?
Synchronicity.
But it's creases in the universe like that. Yeah. That makes me fucking happy for weeks that happened, as if I'm doing something right, or the world could be so wonderful, right? You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm just bullshitting. Sorry. So listen, let's go back to, it's called Tiptoe Through the Crypto, this podcast. I don't know how you managed to run 8. Christ, I'm in trouble doing 2 a week. Bitcoin seems to have held up. I think we know why. I think most of our audience here know that there's a Bitcoin halving coming up, which I think is quite self-explanatory. And if you're that interested, audience, just Google it. Does that mean that Bitcoin is going to go zooming off again, or does it? Is it already baked in, this kind of event next week?
I think it's baked in. It's been baked in for a while. What happens after the halving is anyone's guess, but I guess it's going to go down. Because I think that people are just waiting for the halving. They're investing in it right now, and then they try and take some profit. Yeah. The why people are investing in crypto right now, I think you have to sort of, if you talk to guys like Charlie Shrem, who've been in the Bitcoin world since day one, they call Bitcoin digital gold now, because they think of it as an asset class. We used to think of it as a cryptocurrency, but it's more like a investable asset class now. Absolutely. And so gold is up. And digital gold is up. So, there's a flight to non-traditional, investments during markets like this. In the past, it would have gone out of the stock exchange into bricks and mortar. Yeah. But because of the potential for a bricks and mortar collapse not only in the housing market but commercial real estate, as retail and banking and all of that, is getting punished and will obviously downsize their high street presence. Then we've got some big structural changes. So people are looking for alternatives. Gold is doing very well. Crypto is doing quite well, not as well as gold, but it's a hedge. It's a hedge against fiat and the market right now, and that makes sense. From a traditional investing perspective.
Do you think we're far away from? Well, what about to do the quick fire questions now? Then, how far away are we away from mass adoption
of crypto?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I think if you talk about mass adoption of blockchain, I think we're getting very, very close. I think identity on blockchain is going to be sort of a basis of the way we move forward out of coronavirus. But in terms of you will see the emergence, obviously, of digital fiat, such as the Chinese digital currency. It's not real crypto, but you are going to see mainstream adoption of that before we see, I think, mainstream adoption of crypto. But that will lead to acceptance of crypto.
That would be a question that I would ask as a kind of like novice here, really. There was a really good word I was looking for there, and I couldn't remember it. Bugger. Digital fiat and cryptocurrency gives me the impression that they are different because the digital fiat would be more regulated. Would that be the difference?
Yes, and centralized.
Yes.
Whereas compared with traditional cryptocurrencies, they're built for decentralization. Yeah, I had a very interesting discussion with McAfee about Monero and his new Ghost protocol, and this about decentralization and the role in crypto, which is interesting. But yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's centralized
Yeah.
and
Okay.
it's linked to monetary policy.
Do you have a favorite altcoin like Monero? Do you have one that you particularly like, or any blockchain project that you have heard about?
Look, I'm generally a fan of Ethereum. I've got a lot of respect for Vitalik. In terms of his genius from a design perspective, and contracts on the blockchain and things like that. He really sort of started that. Joe Lubin, is a friend as well, and I think both of those guys have really invested their heart and soul in Ethereum. So I'm generally bullish on that.
Did you know those two guys? Did you know them well? Do you know them well?
Well, I've worked with Vitalik over the years. I wouldn't say I know him well.
I'm just trying to get him onto the show. That's all.
Yeah, but Joe, I could put you in touch with Joe at Consensus. But Joe's, I met Joe at CES actually.
Okay.
And met Vitalik in Boston in, I'm going to say 2013. In Boston. So yeah, I've known him for quite a few years. He's been on the show numerous times. I did the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum with him. The year that I was on a panel with him on blockchain.
I remember that.
When Putin called him out and said, "Let's talk about crypto." So that was pretty interesting, being there to see that. But
like it could have been a euphemism for I'll see you in the Kremlin after this. You know what I mean? So just a couple of final things, Brett. So if someone had, like, I don't know, they've been burnt on their pension or anything and they wanted to diversify, and they had, say, 25, 50 grand, dollars, pounds, Australian dollars, whatever, would you advise them to get into crypto at this time? Or would you say, wait a few months until the price goes down and then it's likely to go up after that, which is my opinion?
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I think your advice is correct. I would invest in health tech right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think coming out of this, there's going to be massive investment in, biometric sensors, biomedical data, all this sort of stuff that we will be, trying to invest in to ensure that something like coronavirus doesn't happen again in the future. And so, there's going to be a flood of investment into that. And if you look at the recovery in 2008, by the time the stock market recovered to its previous levels, 50% of the recovery was in tech.
Yeah.
And the GAFAs and the FANGs, and so I think that's going to be the same here. Although I do think big tech is going to have their feet held to the fire over, their social consciousness.
Yeah.
Coming out of this.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. We've been using the financial system as a family over the last 3 months. Mortgage, holiday, council tax, holiday. Do you know what? I don't really want BT Sport. There's going to be no proper football for a while. Impossible to not unsubscribe from BT Sport. It's those type of companies, that treat you like shit, that I will never, ever use any of their products again. Why would I use Amazon?
People are gonna remember this.
Yes, exactly.
Remember how you treated them during the coronavirus. We've got some big banks here in the US that are refusing mortgage holidays for people. I won't mention names, but some of the biggest banks are saying, "Oh, we'll give you 3 months, off paying your mortgage, but on the 4th month, you've got to pay all the 3 months you haven't paid."
Oh, really? Well, they're still charging interest. You still have to pay the interest.
Whereas mortgage holidays are actually a fairly common thing in most of the Western world, where you can take a 6-month break and it just defers to the end. You just get 6 months added on the end of your mortgage payments, and that's the way it should be being done in the US. But these banks are being predatory right now, and they must pay for this at the end of all.
Absolutely, and hopefully it will be by decentralization. Maybe it will BE digital Fiat in some respect. That may be their only chance. Brett, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, mate. I'm glad you're well, even if you weren't. You know, you may as well come through it. You might have super immunity, and you can go around the world and speak at conferences again. And hopefully, I'll see you there.
Well, I do think we're going to have to carry our coronavirus vaccination cards or our immunity cards with us to travel. Yeah.
Well, there's a privacy conversation that's probably for another time if you come back on the show, which I'd love you to do by the end of the year.
I'd be happy to.
Could you give me a final thing? Price of Bitcoin 2020, end of 2020. Price of Bitcoin at the end of 2021. Just a game.
At the end of 2020, 11,000.
Right.
At the end of 2021, 10,200.
Right. So once you've said it, you can't unsay it. I mean, I'm a bit more optimistic than that.
I don't know.
But anyway, thank you very much, Brett King. This is Monty Mumford from Blockspeak, available on all
Monty.
channels. Brett King there. What are you at Moven now? Are you CEO? Or
well, I'm the chairman. But yeah, if you want to contact me, just go to brettking.com or at Brett King on Twitter, LinkedIn.
Fantastic. I think you'll probably get a spike after this wonderful conversation, and I look forward to coming on your show as discussed. That will be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get that to happen. In fact, we'll get co-hosting.
Yeah, cool. Listen, mate, take it easy. Stay well. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.